Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm happy to represent the Communities of Practice Vertical, and we bring this program to you today. My name is Dexter Vallis, and I am your host today. I lead the COP Vertical for the ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter, and we're very privileged to have Jennifer Nash as our speaker today, all the way from Toronto, Canada. So, hi, Jennifer. Good to have you.
Thank you so much, and pleasure to be with you all.
The pleasure is largely ours, but we will accept. It's so wonderful that we can connect across such a long distance and feel like you are in the room. We have a lot of members from our ICF chapter here, and I can see the numbers increasing as we go by the minute. But notably, we have from my team, our team, we have Shalini. Hi, Shalini.
Hi, Dexter. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, so Shalini is going to be co-host and is going to help us look at the chat box and raise awareness of the questions that are coming there, so that if there's any urgent need to answer something in between, she's going to alert us. But otherwise, also whenever Jen allows us time for question and answers. Nandini over here, hi Nandini, is a perennial presence in all our meetings because she manages tech and admin. So thank you, Nandini, for doing everything, setting everything up. Well,
everyone, good evening.
There you go. There you go. Very, very popular person in our chapter, Nandini. I dare say she's known more than any one of us.
True that.
So we have, certain things to remember while we are here. Please stay on camera if you can, but keep yourselves on mute, because often enough we get to know a few of your secrets, and we could take them and go to the bank with them. But if you're on mute, we won't hear them. But we would love to hear your voice when we unmute, or ask you to unmute and ask questions when we can manage that. So we would definitely try to do that. We have CCEUs granted by ICF, so that's 1.5 CCUs you get today. There will be a claim form link put in the chat box, but it will also be emailed to you. And you've got to answer that with your correct name and spelling and your email address, so that we can send you the CCU EU certificate, which would be a week from now if you fill it within a couple of days. Right. So today we have something you must be really curious about after having looked at the handouts, and some of you may have attempted the assessments, which, by the way, were a mix of paid and free assessments, which Jennifer was very gracious enough to send us. So the free ones are a very quick, very high level look at what your Enneagram type would be like. But the deeper ones would give you more information and would cost a bit. And when you're ready to do that, you could come back to those links and use them. So the topic is not just the Enneagram, it's how the Enneagram is useful when it is used with systemic team coaching for developing collective leadership in high-performing teams. And you'll hear a lot about that as we go along the way. Let me quickly introduce Jennifer Nash a little more fully. I tend to call her Jen, and I hope that's okay with you, Jennifer, because there are many names people call me, but please clarify which one you're going to call me. Anyone?
So, I've changed it, Dexter. It's true. I do go by Jen. I've just changed it.
Oh, how lovely. Yeah. So for those of you who are looking at our names and wondering what is the type appearing, we are all putting our Enneagram type next to our names, so that Jennifer can take a quick look at the gallery and then see which Enneagram types are in the room. If you don't know, there's a point in time where we will ask you to guess. And at that time, you can put your guesswork up as well. So this is Jen, and I'm happy to have a very privileged, not just happy, a very privileged to have Jen with us today. She's a leadership coach, consultant, counselor, lifelong learner, parent, and as arm length of qualifications, BSc, B.Ed, MBA, MA, CPCC, PCC, and ACTC. Ooh, I'm out of breath already. How lovely. It just tells us that there's so much that's going to come from Jen. And she describes herself as someone who serves people to thrive through their leadership and relationships, both in professional and personal life. So thank you, Jen, for choosing us to help us through that as well. She's also an executive leadership coach, a team coach, and consultant, and served within the organizational context as a counselor and serves clients in their personal context as well as a counselor. So the consultant is at the organizational level, the counselor at the personal level, and you can see her beautiful motto, which is also reflected in her website. Be you and live fully is Jen's motto. So Jen, I'm not going to take too much more time, but I'm going to hand the floor over to you. And is there anything that you would like to say to our people as you start? Well, of course, here you go. I'm going to take my slides off the screen so that you can get yours on. And so I'm going to stop share here. There you go.
Yeah. Well,
All
thank you
right.
so much, Dexter. And good afternoon, good evening to you all. And a greeting from, as Dexter said, from Toronto. It's my absolute pleasure to join your chapter to discuss systemic team coaching and the Enneagram today. And yeah, I welcome your curiosity. As Dexter mentioned, I'll pause for some questions at interim and we'll have a little bit of interactivity for a session. But to start, I thought I would share a little story with you. A few years ago, in my role as an internal team coach in drug development for a large multinational Swiss company, I walked into a room filled with brilliant scientists and seasoned commercial leaders. And they were all really sharp, driven, but they were stuck. And as coaches, you know the palpable feeling when people are stuck. There was a lot of tension under the surface between the team members, decisions dragged on. There was back talking and sidebar conversations and mutual trust, and therefore high performance was wearing really thin on this team. They were charged with getting files to the Federal Drug Administration in the US and then the European Medicines Agency in Europe. And they were on a crunch line from 26 weeks down to 12 weeks. So a high stress, high stakes environment. Now here's the twist. Nothing was going to change in their strategic goals, but what needed to change from the team's perspective was how they saw each other, how they communicated and related to one another. And it became a way that we could introduce this simple yet powerful lens, the Enneagram, as a tool into an intact team of 9 people charged with getting this file to the FDA and the EMA. And it was a model that we then scaled through many teams in drug development across the organization. And this is really why I'm here today. Not just to talk about the Enneagram and the types and the traits, which of course we'll go through as Dexter said, at a high level, but to show you how the Enneagram, when woven into systemic team coaching, which I'm aware your chapters had some experience with as well, can unlock high performance relationships that serve in the most high pressure environments for high function and high performance teams. And so the bottom line is high performance relationships underpin high performance teams. And when relationships come into place, they're as complex as the humans that form them. We're as unique as fingerprints, said by my type Enneagram 4, who really appreciates the uniqueness of each individual. But then you bring them together and you have infinite combinations of dynamics, and it become a very rich and fertile ground for coaches to serve within. And so I thought I would start with a little bit about what is the Enneagram. It's a little bit of a funny word, and I know some of you are familiar with this tool or have maybe even used this yourselves in your coaching practices. And so I'm going to keep it at a higher level as we dig into this. But the Enneagram simply is an archetypal tool of 9 different core types. So the numbers 1 through 9 represent core types. And it's a personal development tool that enables us to have a starting spot for our continued growth and integration. Essentially, we are all 9 types, but we prefer and lead through certain worldviews that we hold as our truths, yet people that we partner with may have very different worldviews as well. But as we look to the wholeness of this tool, the idea is that our core type, number 1 through 9, is a starting spot that we can then grow into integration of all 9 types. Ennea means 9 in Greek, and gramma means figure and model. And so the word Enneagram comes from 9 figures in a model. What I'd like to also say about this is that, well, there's many amazing tools that we all have access to as coaches to help our clients look at personality typing. One thing that I would emphasize is unique from my perspective to the Enneagram is the inherent compass or maps, if you will, that are built into this tool for each type to grow, to transform, to appreciate again how they get in touch with all 9 types. So instead of a static personality typing tool that holds us as fixed, over time you start to see leaders really becoming typeless, because they can identify with all the core types. But the curious part is, what's our starting spot? And so today we're going to invite each of you into that experience while I weave in the story of using this tool within systemic team coaching. As mentioned, the Enneagram is a tool that helps us go a little bit deeper under the water level, so to speak, and look at specific defenses, core fears, motivations, vices that each type is familiar with. And usually, of course, with teammates and within relationships, what we see is on the surface level of people. We see a behavior, and we may see and sense some personality. But the Enneagram helps us to dig a little bit deeper. And then through peer coaching in teams, we can really help each other grow and develop through the fabric of the team itself. Essentially, coaching relationships, the leaders' relationships themselves, relationships to others, and the relationships to all of the systems that are dynamic and moving around them, which, of course, as you can appreciate, leaders often walk in innovative spaces where they've doing things or trying to do things they've never done before. And anxiety, fears, and motivations and defenses can become very apparent for leaders. I wanted to share a little bit of the history, and maybe I'll ask if we could put the link to this history slide that's available on the slide just in the chat. So if you would all like to dig a little bit deeper into the history, I'm going to keep it very super high level here. But essentially, the history of the Enneagram goes back to the evidence supporting a long time with roots and going back to stemming from a variety of different mathematical, philosophical, and spiritual traditions. And over time, the more modern authors that you may be able to easily access information from would be down in the 1920s. Gurdjieff would be one of the more bringing them into the modern times. And Claudia Naranjo and Ichazo, this is bringing this more into mainstream work, and then coming into organizational life when in the RETI, which is, there's 2 assessments that we'll talk about, when they became commercially available, this is when we started to see organizations pick up and starting to use this tool in terms of leadership development. So it's a newer tool, I would say, within the space of organizational life, but with a rich history that transcends quite a lot of our foundational mathematical, philosophical, and spiritual traditions.
So, Jennifer, if I may just observe here, this is more than 2,000 years old, almost 2,500 years old, probably the oldest origin of any personality tool that I've come across, and yet it applies so easily to modern needs as a framework today.
Yeah, and I appreciate you noticing that. And one observation that I've had is, as it applies to the diversity of humanity, it invites each of us to the level of our inclusion through our own unique worldviews. And this way it transcends a lot of other intersectionalities because it does look at teams and systems and invites each person into this practice of what's the beauty around each type, and what are some of the ways in which we can have more grounded relationships. And so the history is quite fascinating. If you do take a look at that link, you'll get a lot more detail as to these past 2,000 plus years as its evolution. This is just a really quick snapshot. But a lot of the mystic traditions, and some will say that it's highly grounded in Sufi traditions as well, but you do see a lot of the underpinnings here of more of the philosophical and spiritual traditions. Excuse me, I just dropped that. So if we come back to the use of this tool within the context that I'm wanting to share with you today, within the context of team coaching, specifically systemic team coaching, for many years, as I shared that story, we served as internal coaches within the drug development space organization of about 8,000 people that were in highly agile teams that were always trying to get first to the regulatory bodies to get approval for commercialization of their products. And every time we as a coach were inserted into a team, it was usually about a year-long, 6-month to a year-long relationship with ongoing intervention within that intact team. And our core purpose was learning. This is the 5 C's of the systemic team coaching model from Peter Hawkins. And we were all trained on this model. And the whole purpose, as I said, was team learning and team development. But what I wanted to bring to your attention was the bottom half of the 5 C's of the systemic team coaching model, which are grounded in our processes and relationships. Relationships, the co-creating domain is the relationship internal to the team. And the connecting domain is the relationships that the team has to their external stakeholders. And while a lot of our business coaching efforts within these areas had focused prior on clarifying the doing, the tasks, the tangibles, the deliverables, and commissioning stakeholder expectations, the what we were going to do. As I shared, these teams were really struggling in their capacity to be relational because they were subject matter experts across such diverse areas of their expertise. And they needed help to come into high performance. And it really was the relational challenges, this bottom area that our coaches had to serve within. And this is how the Enneagram, along with a few other tools, 360s namely, became helpful. And so a couple of the questions I just wanted to ground on that we would always ask in the teams were in terms of the culture and the dynamics, how the team would make decisions, how the team would solve conflict, how the team needed to look at how they related with their stakeholders, what types of relationships they were going to be having and how they were going to show up, to what level each member would represent the whole team with the stakeholders. There was a lot of relational questions that had not been sorted through when this team originally formed. And so, thank you, Dexter. I see your hands up. And so I just wanted to pause and welcome some questions. Anything before we continue?
Yeah, I just want to make another observation to what you said, Jen. It's often said that relationships drive results. So it's not that the Enneagram is not looking at, or we are not looking at as coaches at the results, but if we move through the relationships and get that right, the results tend to get delivered largely. Of course, there's more that you have to do there. So I think that's what you're saying. Attend to the relationships because you can't really bypass them to get to the results. And we had a sports coach, an award-winning archer, talk to us the other day, who said that don't look at the results of your, of your performers. Don't look at the performance, but look at what created the performance. And he said, therefore, examine their behavior on the field and what they've been doing. The process is really important that they go through. So thank you for, endorsing that when you talk about how the Enneagram helps.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think this is the phrase of high performance relationships create high performance teams and the desired outcomes that they all want, but coming to the level of the relationship was exactly what I was referring to. And so any questions around this model any questions around the setup and why we're here today, or any curiosities that I can share before we dig into the model itself and explore perhaps what are the types that you identify and resonate with in this room today?
So there's one question that says, are there 9 perspectives of 9 types of leaders for one situation? This is from Satyajit Samant. And I leave you to give us.
Yeah. I love that question. Thank you so much. And I have a slide at the end of I just saw you come on screen there. Hi there, Satyajit. At the end of the presentation, yes, we created with this team, actually, we created one slide that ensured the perspectives of all 9 types were always being discussed, even if that type was not on the team, because when the team would have to go and interface with stakeholders, they wanted to make sure they were inclusive of the worldviews and the perspectives of all 9 types in their stakeholder engagement. So you'll see a slide that we created with the team at the end. We called it the Enneagram slide, that ensured in any team discussion that we would go through, even if those types were not on the actual makeup of the team. And so please stay tuned. I think you'll see a slide and appreciate your question there. So let's take a pause. And some of you may have received the links and an invitation to do an Enneagram prior to our session today, or many of you may have already done one. I know Priya came in already knowing her type and had worked with the Enneagram. But what I'd like to do is take a pause. And if you haven't had a chance to take one of the free assessments or one of the more robust, the RETI or the integrative Enneagram, this slide is available for you. It was sent in your handouts. I'm bringing the program today based on the two tools that we used within systemic team coaching within the context I've shared. The integrative Enneagram is it's a higher price point and a much more robust report that goes into a lot of domains of team coaching and organizational life, specifically within the types. The RETI is a wonderful tool from the Russ Hudson and the Enneagram Institute in New York. And it's a lot more affordable. I think it might be under $20. And so what I would often share with leaders and teams is it depended on their budget, $160 approximately, and the RETI about $20. So a high and low price point. But here are a few others that Dexter and I came up with. Some of them are free. So if you're interested, please play around. But for today, the whole thing is only you can type yourself. Ultimately, we can do as many assessments as we wish, but when it comes to the Enneagram and being a student of this work, the more we dig down under the water level into the iceberg, only you know your core fears, your core motivations, and some of your ways of being in conflict and social dynamics. So as we go through the slides today, I invite you to take a high-level guess, and we'll come out and do a poll with all of those in the room, just like we would with a team, and see what's the makeup of who do we have in the room through the lens of this tool. And then I'll share with you a few case studies of how we worked with Enneagram within the context of team coaching. So with that, you'll have in your handouts one slide for each type, and I'm going to go through them very high level, just about 2 minutes each. And my ask for you is to jot down the most resonant and least resonant types when you self-assess yourself as I go through each, and you'll likely have many different points of resonance. Oh yeah, I see part of myself in this type, and I see part of myself in this type, and that is beautiful because ultimately we hold as Enneagram teachers and coaches that we are effectively all 9 types when we do our integration work and our perspective taking work on terms of how we can see the world around us.
Jen, I can see a question here. So would you like to take it now or, after showing all the slides?
Yeah, please. And if you, we're not going to do take the test now. Those are for either before the session today or after, as Dexter had mentioned. I'm going to go through each of the 9 types. And if you haven't taken one, please just listen and resonate, looking for your most top resonant and your least resonant type. Does that help?
And we'll take the question after the slides, right?
Right, Shalini,
Yes.
I think the question that has been asked by Pramod, he says we can answer it when it comes to that point, which is the influences and relationships beyond the team.
Right.
How do they influence the team dynamics? Does the Enneagram help there? That's a question he says you can come to later.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, will do. Okay, so let's start with type 1. And so please take a look at what is on each of the slides, and I'm going to share with you a little bit of a reading that I put together around each type as well. And so type 1s are very much about improvement and right action, ensuring that things are done correctly. They are principled with clear sense of right and wrong, and may seem idealistic, self-righteous, or judgmental. They can organize their world and values and facts with precision and clarity, working hard to avoid mistakes. Their gifts are in discernment, evaluation, and knowing what is right. My mother is an Enneagram 1, and I've
Most
learned
of my school teachers.
and she was a teacher. So you can start to see some traits. So Enneagram 1, thinking of people perhaps who are like this as well in your teams. And
both my parents are Enneagram 1, Jen.
you know, Priya. Yes. And so the Enneagram 1, different tools have different types. The language used in integrative Enneagram is the strict perfectionist. Other tools, I think the RETI, for example, uses the name, the reformer, to reform as their gift in this world. Okay, so I took a stab. Now, this may be a little bit fun. I took a stab using AI and asked about icons from Indian culture, name it Bollywood or politics or current events, and sports, cricket. And so please be open-minded, because I created this with my audience in mind, but with a little help of AI about who might be some type 1s. And last is Margaret Thatcher, who I would say is well published and documented as a type 1, the Iron Lady from the UK. But this gives you an idea, perhaps, through the lens of AI, so feel discretion there, as to who might be some icons within Indian culture that identifies type 1. And so if these names don't resonate, please forgive me. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else that you want to put in the chat box who you think from Indian culture, be it actors or business leaders or politicians that might be type 1, please contribute, throw some names in the chat box from who you would sense. Type 2, the helper, the considerate helper. 2s want to meet others' needs in a helpful and supportive way. They're very warm, giving, and people-oriented. They seek affirmation from their relationships and may be sensitive and angry if they feel underappreciated. They may over-involve themselves in others' affairs and in others' lives and risk being somewhat manipulative through acts of giving. Their development challenge is to give unconditionally and to nurture themselves as well as others. And so Priya, I know you identify as a type 2. How does that resonate with you?
Totally, totally. I often find myself in a spot saying that, how did I get here? How is it that my own stuff it doesn't get done, and I'm doing stuff at odd hours in the night for others, and I'm constantly not being able to say no. I'm saying yes to everybody but my own self. So putting everybody else on a higher priority than my own self. Very, very, very.
And we can start seeing the gifts and the liabilities of leaders of our core types, right? Yeah. And so how when they're used in a high level of integration and health, and also when we approach our types and worldviews through less healthy lenses. And so again, a few ideas here of some people who you might experience as type 2s, and I added Princess Diana there, her known as being compassionate and out in this world through her lens of humanitarian work. So type 3s, my husband is a type 3. 3s are doers and tend to be practical, task-oriented, and project a polished persona or image. They're competitive and will make sacrifices to achieve their goals and appear successful. They risk becoming overstretched or workaholic at times and may resort to deception or expectancy to win. At higher integrations, they work towards self-acceptance and authentic influence, connecting their hearts and hands together. So their emotions with their doing. And so competitive achievers, the type 3s, lots survive many, many, many years in corporate worlds. They often get referred to as the corporate darlings. They can stay long-term within organizations and hold on to that part of their identity. And here might be some type 3s that I pulled for you to give you a sense as to different personality types that may show up.
So Jen, so I can also see the questions in the chat box, and people are asking that can we have more than one type, or maybe a mix of two, 3 types, the question that I asked you that I can I see my reflection in almost every type.
Yes. So if you take the Reti, for example, you'll get all 9 types listed from your highest to lowest. So again, for this exercise today, we're just asking you to try and use discernment to find what you find is most resonant and least. And we're going to go a few levels deeper in a few more slides that might refine from this high level, meaning what's your core fear? And we're going to name them. And when you see the names of the core fear, you might clearly identify between the types there. So yes, the idea is ultimately we become all 9 types and we're able to be with all 9 types and grow into our wholeness and integration through that lens. But we do all start with a core type. That's the start.
And Jen, I would like to say the how wonderfully you've mentioned the names of such big leaders and celebrities here. We would like to associate some of them with some of them. Maybe it'll be easy for some people to really connect and relate.
Yes, and please do. Like I said, I created these names with the help of AI. So please do take it with a grain of salt, because I was looking specifically for icons that
if I may say here, all of these people except one are very typically type 3. Narayan Murthy doesn't fit in this. And but all the others have a very strong voice. They're opinionated, they're out there, they're able to do their work, they really work hard, they're performers, they're go-getters, all of them.
I think Murthy comes as a type 5.
And Narayan Murthy seems like an odd fit, but everybody else.
He's probably a type 5.
This is why I asked for your help in discernment, because I full disclosure
sure.
was
Thank you for
trying. This is great. This is great. Achha, by the way, somebody just said over here in an aside that she or he is a mixed mithai.
Yes. So then we'll go into maybe now I'll come back to this, but I'd like you to also pay attention to, once you find your core type, like I'm a type 4 or Dexter's a type 8, the numbers on either side of you. We're not going to go into this today in any depth, but we call those our wings, like our wing people. Any core type needs your 2 wings. So I need my 3 and my 5 as a 4, and I need to sometimes harness my wing support. So we call the numbers on either side of your core type your wings. And those are very important because you'll see definitely you might have a dominant wing and a less dominant wing type as you go through. But the key is how do you work out both wings, the number on either side of your core type. So you will start seeing bits and pieces. But again, the exercise for right now is to really practice discernment as we go through more of the slides and try and find your most resonant type and your least resonant type of yourself. Okay?
Then can we take a few questions here? I can see questions in the chat box.
Yeah, let's do one more type and then I'll come back, okay?
All right.
So we'll get through type 4.
Yeah, we need to just keep a track on how the flow is going, Shalini. So we will keep the questions for certain pauses. But of course, Jen, let's take the one that you're talking about now.
Yeah, we'll do my type 4 here. Type 4, not very pronounced in corporate world, government organizations either, but it's the intense creative. And every once in a while, I come across another one of the 4s in this work. But 4s search for meaning, depth, and authenticity. Hence why I love the Enneagram. They're emotionally sensitive and attuned to their environment. They're creative and expressive as individuals. Dexter's probably experienced this as part of working with me over the last few months. They may seem emotionally moody, dramatic, focusing on what's lacking in their lives. As they integrate, 4s get in touch with their inner creative voice, but able to separate their identity and their emotions. So the most probably emotional, intensive type. And when we look at, again, some people that may or may not, again, grain of salt, I added myself to there, but let's just invite you to sense your awareness of the intense creatives in your world. And let's come back. Maybe we'll pause here. We're going to go through all 9 types. So I'll take a few questions now if they've come up, and then we'll get through all 9 types.
Okay. So I just take 1 or 2 questions. So there's one question from Satyaji. He's asking, is it that to become successful, we must follow one type strongly and must not get attached to other types?
Not quite. So the way that we hold this tool is for leaders to develop self-awareness in their beneath the waterline through their own core type. So what is your core motivation, your core fear, your vice, your virtue, your passion, some of these different categories. And from there, if you only see the world through that perspective and that alone, your effectiveness will be limited. The idea of integration and growth is remembering all 9 types. Russ Hudson from the Enneagram Institute takes leaders on trips through Egypt to look at the Egyptology of the Enneagram. It's a unique trip. And the story of Isis is around remembering the 9 dismembered pieces of that piece of Egyptology. The story of Isis around remembering. So if you can hold that from any core type, how do we remember all of these parts? You may notice that certain types trigger you thinking about your own relationships in work and life. Those are the precise types that we can learn a lot from because we've likely disowned or repressed or oppressed those aspects of ourselves. And remembering them becomes very helpful to unleash and unlock our potential and continued growth if you hold that leadership development is a lifelong journey. It's about the journey, not the destination. So I hope that makes sense. It's not about to be success is to maximize only your one type, like other tools, maybe DISC or other coaching tools where we type, but this tool is routed in growth. So we'll get into that, but I hope to come back for another session because today's session is not necessarily about the development and the remembering of all 9 types. We would have a session 2
Absolutely love
today. What I'd love
that.
today I'd like to focus on how we use this tool within teams. So for your purposes right now, we're just inviting a very high level typing, again, of your least and most resonant types.
Thank you.
Any other questions that I should answer right now?
So you can just continue. We can take other questions maybe after some time.
Sure.
We finished
Okay. Great. So the type 5s, a lot of the scientists I worked with were type 5s, the quiet specialists. 5s are private individuals with active mental lives, observing and exploring how the world works around them. They struggle to share thoughts and feelings and may seem socially awkward or disinterested. At lower integration, 5s may be withdrawn, antagonistic, and aggressively defend their isolation. At higher levels of integration, they are intellectual pioneers, bringing their perspective and wisdom unselfconsciously out into the world. Some quiet specialists. What do you think?
It's not
Sensing some of these.
right now, and of course, it's not going to happen.
Stephen Hawking, to me, would be
Still,
a
take time.
good description of a type 5. Very cerebral depth to him, right? A physicist who pioneered the world of physics.
Sure. Yeah.
Such. Yeah. What do you think about some of these other icons from Indian culture? Type 5,
Yeah.
Dexter? Yeah, you
No,
can see
seems
it?
good. Seems good. Yeah. You've chosen well. AI has
Yeah.
chosen well.
Yes, I have to give it. Now, type 6s, this was my father. Type 6s easily tune into potential danger and risk. They're hypervigilant, acting on a sense of anxiety and think in skeptical ways. They value trust, responsibility, and loyalty, and need to feel that they are safe to belong. At lower integration, they may be paranoid, reactive, and insecure as loyalty turns into dependency and oversensitivity. But at higher integration, self-reliant and grounded 6s give confidence to those around them, resiliently coping with risk. Okay. Thinking of people you may know who live their life through a lens of hypervigilance, always doing risk assessments, sensing their loyalties. And these may be some, type 5, excuse me, type 6. These may be some type 6s that you resonate with. Okay. Type 7, we have 2 more to go. Type 7 are enthusiastic visionaries. They love variety and adventure. They're simulation and fun-seeking people, tackling challenges with optimism and engaging life in a future-oriented way. As team members, they bring creativity, energy, and optimism. They seem distracted and somewhat hedonistic, insensitive or irresponsible to others at times. 7s are often unhappy, but deny this at all costs, escaping into hyperactivity and impulse pleasure seeking to avoid suffering. At higher integration levels, they're present and finding joy from within. You may know some 7s in your life, the ever optimistic,
the
positive.
eternal optimist. We have an actor called Ranveer Singh, who's probably type 7. Oh, there he is.
You think so? I got it.
Oh,
I got it on there.
You got it.
Ranveer Singh. Oh, I'm so happy. So you can sense, let's compare their energy to, let's say, some of the other energies of people that we've put up there today. And I added Richard Branson, an adventure-seeking, rather hedonistic, very, very impactful leader, but leads in his worldview, type 7. Type 8, Dexter and a few others. I see Renew and a few others have put type 8 up here. And so our love for our type 8s, they're forces of nature with strong presence and personality, then values being in control. I see a little smile coming up in Renew. They're guarded but caring and protective of those around them. They mask any vulnerability with tough, no-nonsense exterior, and they may seem intimidating and confrontational. But at higher integrations, they combine their directness with compassion, collaborating with others while serving the greater good. And our type 8s, How did we do here?
Oh yeah. Oh my. The last name is it's definitely something.
I think it's
But Anand,
a matter of how healthy our type 8s are in terms of their integration. Yeah. But the last name there, you can see that's the embodiment of maybe a full on an integrated 8. You know, where's the compassion there? Not
yeah, I
from my
absolutely agree with
perspective.
Anand, Mahindra, Mary Com. Yeah. I mean, you've got a good list here.
Yeah, you think so? Yeah. Renew, our other 8 in the room that I see, a little bit of resonance with these types, I hope. And last but not least, our adaptive peacemakers. Our adaptive peacemakers are diplomatic and attuned to the ideas of others, often as facilitators and mediators in groups. They form the glue between people with their friendly, grounding, and stable demeanor. They struggle to connect with their own points of view and say no, and often avoid conflict at all costs. At high integrations, they are independent and self-respecting, acting with self-awareness and autonomy. They're the harmony makers in the world. They're the ones who will find peace. Yeah.
Somehow, I think
That's good.
Sachin Tendulkar would have come as a type 1, in the sense that, he's a perfectionist, wants everything done in a particular way and a very high achiever. But yeah, as a captain, he probably came to as a type 9, stepped back and let the pieces fall in place. I think Rohit Sharma, our current captain, would be a type 9.
Now, I appreciate what you just said, Dexter, because if he is a type 1, that's a wing to a 9. Remember, if we go back to the model, here, just down at the bottom, we talked about the wings on either side. So you mentioned you might sense them as a type 1. When we think about those wings, we have a dominant wing that's very supportive of our core type, and we have a less dominant wing. And the idea that both wings need to support the core type. So you might see that 9-1 might be a strong wing. Now, we're not going to go into the wings and lines and the compass today, but we will hopefully get to another session with the development. But I appreciate that you said that around maybe a 1, but you could see a 9. So AI's getting it there. Dalai Lama, I was sensing maybe a 2, but AI was saying no, a 9. So again, we come back to only we can type ourselves. Only we can actually do it. We can take all the tests, but after we learn and are a student of the Enneagram, we really do settle on our own core type. And from that spot, we can grow. So I wanted to take a quick pause here and invite a poll. So for those in the room, we're going to ask you to put in your most resonant core type, not the least resonant today, but just note what your least resonant was and get curious. What is it about that least resonant type that you reject? And what can you learn from others who show up with that type? So let's take a quick poll. What do you think? If you were to take your high level guess, if you haven't done an Enneagram, or if you have, please put in your type. And let's look at the distribution as if this was our team, as if all of you here today was the team that I was coaching. This would be the first step. We need everyone to come aware of their core type. Step 1. And so when you're done answering, we'll take a quick look at the display, and we'll see what the distribution's like. Now, most of you, I assume, were coaches too, so we may see patterns. What I really appreciated in drug development was you could see very unique types between the different functions. So whether it was data science or clinical science, let's say, or regulatory science or bench science or clinical trial operations, you saw unique types. Most of the data scientists I served were 5s. They just very cerebral. In that case. So you could start to see different subcultures within functions as well in the organizational context. And so whenever the poll is up, I'll invite you to display the results on the screen.
Yep.
Yeah, sure then. I think people are still taking the polls and have to open.
So while we're waiting, somebody was asking what would be the type of a coach?
Yeah, so there's no type of a coach
I know.
except to say that the way in which I as a coach always show up is to disclose my type and share with my type, because it is how then the coach will show up in that team system as part of that system. And so when working with even one-on-one clients, individual clients, as a coach, I always disclose the type if I'm doing Enneagram work, because then there's a foundational appreciation as to the worldviews, the motivations of that coach. So getting to know our type and how we coach through that lens is very interesting. And right now, the Coactive Training Institute has a leader who's putting on a series of coaches who type through Coach 8 orientation. That's on the 28th of May. A friend of mine will participate. Coaches who type through a type 5 orientation, and bringing panels together of coaches who are discussing doing their work through their Enneagram worldviews, which I find fascinating, because then we can understand the dynamics more fully as we keep going through. Is there any other questions, or are we ready to see the poll?
So there are questions, but we can see the poll result first.
I think we're all curious about our types and whether it suits the job descriptions we have. Typically.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah,
So
share
let's
the
just
poll
take
result.
this. Thank you so much.
So we
let's
have
just take a look.
type 9. Nobody in type 9, or we can see type 9, is it?
Just scroll down. Type 9, we have 6%.
Oh yeah, we have 6%.
But we have 0 type 6s, for example, and 4%. We only have a couple type 7s in the room. And
We
so what
have
you see here,
3 at 17, yeah. 2, 3,
Yeah.
and 8.
yeah. And so what you see here, imagine we were a team, or a team of teams, a systemic team coaching, and we were working together in a function. As a coach coming into this space, I would take a look at the distribution in the room. I would also pay attention to what types are not here. Because remember, we're going to be looking at relationships through the lens of not just internal to the team, inside the team, but we're going to be looking outside the team, how the team has relationships with its stakeholders. And if the team only shows up with the worldviews and the ways of experience the world through the lens of what's on the team, they may be missing how to effectively connect with stakeholders who may identify through a different Enneagram type. So this comes back to a task that we always did with our teams, was to make almost like a checklist of when in decision-making and in relational work, what types of questions to ask to ensure inclusion of all 9 types. Again, a diversity and inclusion model to the level of the individual that transcends any intersectionality, which was another reason why we use this tool from a diversity and inclusion perspective at the level of the individual. And so I wanted to bring us back to my whole purpose as a systemic team coach was core learning of the team, how to be, and the Enneagram, how to be in relationships, helped both internal and external. We also did business coaching where we were looking at the tasks and outcomes, both internal and external to the team. So this is around the being and the doing. The being of leadership is the bottom, the doing is the top. And again, as Dexter was helping me to set this up, the premise is if we had high performance relationships within these teams, we could then have high performance outcomes. But if you recall, the teams got stuck and they called in coaches to help in how they related to one another. So I see a hand up. And I think what I can do is pause for one question if you'd like before I continue moving forward.
Yeah, should I stop sharing the results? Are you moved to the
Yes.
phone?
Yes, thank you.
So I think we can take a question from, I think Mahesh he raised his hand. So Mahesh, you can just unmute yourself. Or Vibhu. Vibhu,
Hi,
you can please.
Shalini. Maheshwari this side.
Maheshwari. Okay,
Yes.
sorry, I could see only Mahesh. Sorry, Maheshwari, please go ahead.
Okay. So the question, hi, Jen. It was a very interesting presentation. I just want to understand, when it comes to destruction, what could be the worst type among all these ones?
So what we hold is that there's no good or bad in any of the types. And so what we hold is how do we relate to one another through the lens of having more awareness and consciousness as to our patterns, our vices, our fears, our motivations, the under the waterline, so to speak. And we all have vices, we all have passions, we all have the uniqueness of the dynamics on how we show up in relationships. And so withholding judgment of good or bad is core to being in working with the Enneagram.
Okay, just your sharing triggered one thought. Okay, if somebody, you spoke about their relationship, if somebody is die-hard achiever, who would be the best partner in relationship when we look at a couple relationships?
I love the question that you're asking. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to use 2 case studies that show some dynamics between 2 different types. But if you do access the RETI, which was one of the tools I shared out, you can go to the Enneagram Institute and you can look at the dynamics by putting in the match of any types and read about the relational dynamics between types. For the purposes of today, we're going to look at 2 case studies that look at the space between, but we're not going to have time to go through the dynamics of all 9 types. So I do hope that you'll access the RET, and it's free to do that. I'll just do that. Yeah. And
thank you so much.
Yeah, is there one more question that you'd like right now? I see a hand up.
I think Vibhu can ask another question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. My question is, if you look at the Enneagram image, there are lines inside which are connecting from one type to the other. What is the significance of that?
Yeah, thank you so much. The lines are part of the compass of development. I'm just going to get to the bigger image here for you. The lines are part of the compass of development. And we're not going to go into the lines and the paths today because I hope to be able to be brought back to look at the compass and how to work these aspects. But essentially, each type has 2 lines. One is a line of integration. When things are going well, how do we access our growth path to that line? And a stress line, a de-integration. And being aware of those 2 lines helps us to then, and the wings, and the lines helps us to find our compass of development. And we can do that individual work, but as a team coach, I started to do that in the collective with everyone. And then they started peer coaching each other in that space towards their lines and wings. But for today's exercise, we're not going to go into the mechanism because we're going to look a little bit more at the team dynamics and some case studies. I thank you for your question, and I hope that we can dig in more to the compass, so to speak.
Sure, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. There is one question that I can see in the chat box. Maybe you would like to answer that. So Sandeep Kalra has asked that it is interesting, but is there any scientific basis of these types?
So if you go back to the history of the Enneagram and you look at and I encourage you to read about the foundation, the 2,000 years old, the basis comes back as far as early mathematicians, Pythagoras and such. And so when you think of what type of scientific evidence you would want and you would need, what we worked with the scientists was to not challenge, but to truly tune into themselves and how they experience the human experience in life through spirituality, through in terms of their philosophical views, in terms of some of the mathematical components to this model as well. So I hope that can answer your question, and I encourage you to look back at the history from those different perspectives, philosophical, mathematical, and spiritual. So to move forward into team coaching and how we applied this, I'd love to bring you back to a couple of the questions that we asked all teams in the co-creating domain as a coach when we would come in and work with the teams. We would ask each team, what is the team purpose and culture, and what is it not? So we're in this domain, and Enneagram helped us to get to the team culture, because every team has its unique culture based on the components, the people that make it up. The Enneagram also helped us to answer the question, how will the team navigate conflict and decision-making? And the Enneagram was the tool that had the team answer these questions. Last, what will help and hinder this team in terms of peer coaching each other's behaviors and getting very clear on how do I help you shine? How do you help me shine? And what triggers us? And getting clear on language so we could then coach through. On the connecting domain of systemic team coaching, which was relationships that the team had with external to the team stakeholders, we always ask what's the nature of the team's relationships with these stakeholders? How will the team be represented and influence stakeholders regarding the stake or purpose? And each type will answer a different perspective of that. How should we influence? A type 5 is going to answer different than a type 2, than a type 4 or type 8. So they had to have discussions on influence with stakeholders through the lens of the makeup of that team, and also the types that were not present on that team, because stakeholders may not resonate. They may be a different type. And last but not least, how will the team generate and receive feedback from stakeholders? And so the Enneagram helped us to answer some of these questions. This was the makeup of the first team that I ever brought the Enneagram into in drug development. And it was 9 members, all from different subject matter expertise, and a commercial leader. So the commercial leader was in and of itself a functional area. But otherwise, brilliant minds within their own disciplines, but then having to come together as a team in a shortened, compressed time from 26 weeks and down to 12 weeks to get a file to the regulatory bodies during COVID. Also, well, in agile transformation and new ways of working. And a lot of the scientists had never worked on a file before. A lot of them had just come, it was a new therapeutic area for the organization. And a lot of them had come out of academia and come into industry and completely out of their cultural element and water and how leaders behaved with one another. And so the Enneagram, again, became a tool that we utilize across the team and different geographical locations, because the teams were dispersed across, well, up to 35 different countries in terms of the makeup. So you can see here we had 2 2s, a 9, 2 8s, 2 6s, and a 2 5s, just kind of like we did the poll together. And we also noticed what perspectives and worldviews were missing from this team.
Quick question, Jen. Quick
Yeah.
question. Someone wants to know if the size and shape of the dots mean anything, the black dots.
No, I'm sorry, they don't. No, this was just a rough snapshot because I had the leaders all add their circles on. So there's no meaning behind the circles except to say they represented people that they put on. And I just took a snapshot from an old file, to be honest with you. So I'm sorry I didn't, but please don't take any meaning about the size, just that they're individuals who said that this is their core types. And we set up with the team as well. Usually we watch and observe someone's behavior and we make assumptions about them based on our own worldviews. But we're going to do away with assumptions and deepen our curiosity into, you're all standing in a new therapeutic area, working in ways and people you've never worked with before during COVID in a shortened time crunch, high stress, high stakes scenario. What anxieties and fears are here? We got real about it. What motivates each of you? And they could speak through their lens of their Enneagram motivations as well. What are some of the defenses, vices? And we went through these domains. So with you today, I'm going to go through some of these, and it may help you refine your core type. If you were sitting like, I'm not sure, I might be an 8 or I might be a 3. I'm not sure. let's pay attention and see which fears and motivations resonate. And in your handouts that I shared with you, there's a few other sections too that we're not going to cover today in today's webinar, but those handouts categorize different ways of relational dynamics for each type. So I do encourage you to look through all of your handouts for these slides. So let's come and look at this team then through the lens of how will each type try to get what I want? How do I get what I want? We call these social styles of engagement. And this is where we start to see the rule of threes show up within the Enneagram. There's a lot of triads and threes, and from a mathematical perspective and a spiritual one, you often see the rule of threes show up in a lot of models that have transcended time. So first off, the assertive types, to get what they want, they'll push forward with confidence and self-definition, getting their needs met really independently. They're types 8, 3, and 7. The compliant types, when you're trying to get what they want, they become connected guide. They become guided through others, through cooperation and responsibility. They become very compliant and try and, as we heard Priya say, sometimes it's hard to say no, right? I'll just comply, and this is how I can get what I need. And the withdrawn types, the types that will pull away to try and get what they need met, and they pull into more introspection. This is me. I'll go internal and kind of close down and do my own processing. Self-sufficiency in terms of preserving autonomy and clarity through withdrawing. So thinking of people in your families and lives, teams you've worked with or other people, if you can notice, some people will push up against to get what they want and challenge, force, assert themselves very easily. And others will pull away, withdraw very easily, and have people kind of come draw towards them. And others will lean in and be very compliant. I'll play on the team. I'll do what I need to do. And so noting your own core type, you may see the pattern here and say, yes, this is how I respond, how I get what I want. Or you may see a different, more resonant word, and it might be corresponding to another resonant core type. So again, only you can type yourself. Conflict styles. What do I do when I don't get what I want? Now, these are the patterns that show up. And as a coach within a team, you see them instantly. And this is probably the number one way I've learned to start typing people who haven't really invested in typing themselves. But I get a quick sense when you see conflict come up in teams because it's quite apparent. Those that are avoidant, and this comes from Karen Horney's work, they call them the Hornivians in Enneagram. And if any of you do leadership circle profile, these correspond to the reactive tendencies in the leadership circle, or Karen Horney's work that underpins this part of Hornivians. So avoidance, type 2, 7, and 9, they're going to avoid conflict. Remember what we read about 9s, the Dalai Lama, 7s, the futuristic visionaries, and the 2s. Conflict is a let's move away type of response. The methodological, those that then will prioritize logic, solutions, take control through their heads, not their hearts. And the methodical types, 1, 3, and 5. And then the reactive types, the ones that are going to show you all their emotions and share and lead through a very intense, charged truth, emotionality in that spot, in that way. And if you ask my husband and children, I often say they're the only ones who get full package deal, because in workplaces, I know as a type 4, I keep a lot of emotionality at bay, right, in service of others, because if I was truly open, so I've had to learn to regulate my conflict styles in that sense. So let me take a pause. Going back again, self-assessing your own social style, dominant social style, and maybe the least dominant for you. and again, your conflict style. And that may help to refine your core type if you were sitting between a couple options. So let's look at core fears. Now, as I said, high stakes, leaders who have come out of academia, they're working in industry the first time, they're taking in transformation within the organization, standing on growth edges, their identities are being challenged with fear. Leaders walk through fear, standing on growth edges, doing things we've never done before. And so noting when the fears come up, I'd like you to take a good look at your core type and sense, is there truth behind your core fear? If you were to ask the most deep level of what do you fear in life, what might be your perspective to that? And what might be some of your teammates or loved ones' perspectives as to their worst fear? And I hear, yep, that's me, from Priya in the chat. Yeah. And so for me, being without identity is a real big thing. One of the reasons I love the Enneagram is because it's so inclusive of everyone's uniqueness and wholeness. And so I've noticed that that's part and parcel of, how I work through that core fear of my own. Now, here are the core values. Again, within teams, you start to see people acting and behaving through the lens of their values. And you can see different values show up here, aligned to the different core types. Again, noting your wings, the numbers on either side of your core type is helpful as well. Okay. Now, coming back to that team, we would go through a team coaching session after everyone had done their Enneagram, and we looked at specifically the motivations, the core fears, the social dynamics, the conflict styles, and also using other tools in the integrative Enneagram decision making. There were other categories. We did layer into the team coaching as well, but we particularly looked at what I've just shared with you. And what it enabled was peer coaching between the team members and a language at which they could work on their relationships in ways that they didn't have access to before the coaching. And what we did, and this is a handout that I hope you can either put in the chat. If you do have it, I did send one to you with Dexter yesterday, but if not, I know it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but this is the type of compilation that I put together for each team that I would work with. I would put a chart together. What's the core motivation of each type, the core fear, the social style, conflict style, and moral values. And from that, it would give me a legend as a coach to understand the perspectives that everyone was coming from in their relational dynamics. Now, coming back to Vivi's question around the lines and the growth paths, I also added in what the growth path was for each type through their lines and their wings, which you can do research online, a plethora about, or books as well. But each type does have somewhat of a pathway for their growth. And then communication tips that each type would appreciate. And these two columns became very much coaching tools to help when challenges, or what I called creative abrasion, or the rub, would happen between team members that got them stuck. And so from a chart like this, similarly, we had two different events that happened on this team that had them stuck twice, two different times. And I wanted to share with you one from the internal perspective of the team between members, and then also through the the external relationships with the stakeholders in that model of systemic team coaching. And so let's take a look at these couple case studies here, and then we'll stop for some questions. So scenario one, the conflict was between the 8s and the 5s in the room. So those of you who identify as 8s and 5s, so far anyway, on your Enneagram journeys, tune into this and see. And those that don't identify as 8 and 5s, imagine you had these two types on your team and that this was happening in terms of the context and the situation. So the context is we have the assertive type 8, the challenger. The team member felt frustrated with a type 5, the investigator who wanted to go and gather all of the information. The type 5's colleague was very reserved during strategy meetings. Remember, they held back the type 5. They held back, they were very reserved, and it was frustrating the 8. But the 5s needed was to go and gather as much data and facts as they could. That was their safe spot in fear. And the 8 interpreted the 5's quietness as disinterest and withholding. They made an assumption through their own worldview about that person because the type 8 experiences the world differently than the type 5. Well, the type 5 felt overwhelmed by the 8's intensity and avoided engaging. And so these two team members and the team as a system, because we had 8s and 5s were having some of these challenges. So we brought this dynamic up within the session, the team coaching session. Excuse me, I just need to get. So the conflict that happened was that the 8 publicly challenged the 5 in the meeting, saying, if you have ideas, speak up. Otherwise, you're wasting space on this team. The 5 shut down entirely, avoided the 8, and stopped contributing to joint tasks altogether. You can see how easy this can happen. Okay. So the coaching intervention in this case was using the Enneagram. I helped the 8 to see how their intensity and need for control could trigger others' defenses against them. And that self-regulation of their intensity and control was helpful to de-emphasize triggers in others' defenses, especially those with a strong need for privacy. So the types that withdraw, there were 3 types in particular, and autonomy, the 5 is one of them. Meanwhile, the 5 was coached on how their pattern of emotional detachment and moving away could be misunderstood as aloofness, and that clarity and boundaries were crucial for navigating the interactions with assertive types. They needed to stand up and meet with a level of intensity to have a healthy relationship. So now became the work on both. They started experimenting with how the 8 could regulate their intensity and how the 5 could start to engage with more emotionality in terms of the intensity that was needed. The resolution in the team coaching session, the 8 acknowledged their tendency to push people into action and express genuine interest in the 5's insights, and the 5 shared that they needed time to prepare and prefer smaller formats for offering their input. And so the agreement they had an agreement to have pre-meeting planning sessions where the 5 could share ideas one-on-one with the 8, and where the 8 could then amplify the 5's contributions during the group discussions, partnering with them, not against them. And the 8's energy amplified what the 5 brought to the table.
Really
The
different
outcome?
conflict and social styles of these two, right? I mean, Jen?
Exactly.
I mean, the
so
8 is more aggressive, assertive, and the 5 is
5s
more
can withdraw.
withdrawn.
So
Yeah.
then you can see power dynamics. Whose is more important? Whose energy? And so the coach coming in the middle could help to see the different ways or worldviews of the different types, and then have them start working together and peer coach one another, instead of always to have the coach present. The ultimate goal was the team members could
just left to themselves, the 8 would have crushed the 5, and the 5 would have withdrawn and taken all his information with him.
And so this is what would happen. And when they came into the room, the beginning story, they were stuck. They were not. And now you can see the second scenario, when the team got stuck, they had challenges with their external stakeholders as well. And so type 2, the second case, and we can come back to both of them.
Sorry, Jen, there's something very funny that struck me. When we were all kids growing up and playing cricket, as kids, There was one guy who would bring the wickets and the bat and things like that. But when he felt overpowered by an 8, let's say a type 8, who was a very aggressive fellow, and they had a conflict, then he'd say, okay, you play by yourself. I'm taking my wickets and bat and going away. It's like the 5.
And there you go.
This is
I'm
my
going away.
information. I'm going away with it. You play with yourself.
Yeah. And if you do look at trends, here's something I will say. You do see a lot of type 8s that turn to be CEOs and leaders, and they need help with regulating their power, their intensity, to be able to hold inclusiveness of all their team members, through whatever worldviews. And not to say that all 8s are, but you just do see attend to that energy. It's such a powerhouse of an energy, but learning to channel it becomes really important. So here, what happened, the 5 began contributing more consistently in meetings because the 8 would then amplify it for them.
Right.
Instead of the 5 having to try and do their own amplification. And the 8 channeled their leadership into making space for others, which is what the 8's growth path is in terms of being an effective leader as well. The relationship then shifted from tension to mutual respect. I see you, you see me. One's not better than the other,
Right.
but it's a different energy here. And their clearer roles and communications came up. Now, if we look external to the team, here's this type, we don't have any type 6s in the room from our poll. So this may not be as resonant because, well, I took a guess here, but we didn't have any type 6s in the room. So I do invite you to look back to the type 6, the skeptic loyalist. And type 2, we do have a few with us here today. But can you imagine then the dynamics, the 8s and the 2s in this team, they were responsible for having relationships with external stakeholders on a few different business needs. And how they each approached the stakeholder was completely different from one another. And that caused challenges and confusion with the stakeholder because how they were experiencing the team and what the team was delivering to them was now filled with a little bit of challenge and conflict. And so what happened here? We had our type 6, the loyalist. Remember, they're driven through fear. Fear to faith is their move. They're very skeptical and looking for hypervigilance all around them. Anxiety leads the way a lot of the times. And they're very helpful, especially for risk assessment. Like risk assessment's very big in terms of what a 6 would get into. And then our type 2s are helpers. They're our givers. Sometimes are over givers. And that gift and strength can serve and get in our way. So we had type 6 and type 2s, and they were managing, I said, a partnership with a new client, an external stakeholder. And the 6 was focused on, as we said, all the contracting. It was all of the hypervigilance as to what was going to go into the contract with this client, and pushing for investment of time and energy, legal reviews, and strict compliance. And the 2, of course, was then through more of a relational harmony lens with that client, trying to please the client, making verbal commitments, offering additional supports. And some of those offers conflicted with the internal protocols on the team. So the client
I've seen this happen in meetings that we've had when I used to work. It's sometimes quite funny because you have the 6 pushing for compliance and the 2 saying at the side, probably even gesturing lower than the table, don't worry, I'll sort it out.
Yep. And then taking in a relational approach, and at times it works and at times doesn't. So the coach seeing these dynamics and hearing the stories could surface this in the room and then have use the Enneagram as a tool to give language to the discussion. And so here the client received mixed messages, reassured informally by the tool at all costs, but later then restricted by the formal clauses that the Enneagram 6 emphasized. And
but the good thing is that the social styles of 2 and 6 are kind of in the same boat. The kind of compliant, So there's something going for both of them there.
And so when you do find hooks where there is points of similarity, it's usually a starting spot between different types, a really good starting spot. But in this case, what we ended up doing by way of an intervention, because the client felt misled, and of course, what ended up happening is then the fears, anxiety went up, and the two shame went up. And so now we had two people in the team experiencing anxiety and shame. And that
we
helps
have
people
5 minutes left. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So we've got 5 minutes left where we can look at what's important for us.
Thank you. And so what I'd like to share with here, put up the result here, was that what we did in terms of the coaching intervention was the 6 confronted their uncertainties that made them uncomfortable. They became very aware and could speak to the fear of being under pressure, resulting in worst case scenario thinking at all times. The 2 was actually able to, because they like to lead by overpromising, they weren't cross-checking internally, and both were coming to more protective motivations. And so what we had the teams do was to look at how their uncoordinated actions led to mistrust with the team. And ultimately, they needed to coordinate their actions ahead of time to be with that team. And so I'll close with this. Because the teams don't know who you're going out to, and we also had team types that were not on the team, this was the checklist, so to speak, that we constructed with the team to ensure that whenever we had discussions internally, we could go through the different worldviews that tapped into the different components of each type, as well as the types that weren't on the team. You can see here 4, patent protection was quite unique to drug development. It was a unique question, but otherwise the questions are quite generic in nature. And I encourage you to maybe take a snapshot of this and consider your next meeting and your relationships in terms of how inclusive you are through all 9 different worldviews. And so as I close today, I want to say thank you. A quote here that I offer is the Enneagram doesn't just reveal who we are, it shows us how we limit ourselves and one another. And in high performance relationships, it's not about fixing any personality flaws. It's around integrating diverse strengths, of course, into a unified and adapted agile whole. And of course, in drug development and many other industries, we have a lot of complex and dynamic operating conditions, making relationships through the uncertainty challenging for teams. I'd also like to share there's a lot more that we can go down. The Enneagram is one of those tools you can constantly be learning about. So if we do have another opportunity, I'd love to come back and look at instincts and wings. And as Vibhu said, the lines and centers of intelligent expression and structure. And all of those are also available in your handouts. But thank you for inviting me today. And Dexter, I'll invite you to close us out.
So thanks very much, Jen. I think you've handled a vast subject in a very short time. So thank you for bringing so much sharp clarity to this. And plus you have helped superimpose it on systemic coaching. So it's not just the Enneagram that we've been talking about here. Nandini would have already put the link for the CCU form and feedback in, but we'll be sending it to you. So don't worry about those things. In the meanwhile, if there's one important question anyone wants to ask, please unmute yourself and ask so that we can quickly handle it. But we kind of at the end of time, so we can just take one question. Yes, Pramod Solanki. Please do ask, Pramod. Yeah.
Yes, I can see 2-3 questions in the chat
Yeah,
box. One from
we take one from Pramod.
Thank you.
Just now.
I saw another competing hand, but thank you. So I now
and there is
since
Kranti as well.
Okay, let's hear from Pramod first.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So we know in organizational teams this piece, of course, awareness about your style and the conflicts were rooted in that. And once that awareness improved and coaching happened, things got better. Sometimes these, Jen, sometimes these clashes are rooted in power and politics, not so much in your inherent natural style. Did you not experience that in this intervention?
I love that question, Pramod. And maybe what the context was that I didn't highlight was the organization was going under a massive agile transformation, which was taking the systems and structures that held these teams through many layers of hierarchy and flattening them and imposing decision-making at the ground level. And so with regards to power and positional power and authority, it's always present in organizations, yes. And the context was very flat, self-managing, agile teams at which the coaches were put in to intentionally remove hierarchy from the system. And so this was where we started to see more collaboration and equanimity between team members, that once different functions had different power structures, and this was all part of transformation work at large. I hope that gives you some context.
Yes, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, okay,
Sure,
thanks.
sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Could we take those other two questions? Jen, do you have time?
Yeah, sure, thank you. I'm more than happy to stay for anyone who wants to stay.
Shalini, you want to ask who's the person who has a question? Can't hear you.
So I saw a question in the chat box. I think I took the name earlier. So whosoever was there can please, Prachi, I think. Prachi, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. Jen, this is very insightful, especially when you have taken the conflicts between the pairs and everything. I also work as agile transformation coach. One thing I'm curious about is, there is a traditional way of honoring leadership, the aggression, the go-getter attitude. And when we, through Enneagram, coach leaders to acknowledge different ways in which people can contribute, do you have an example through which, the criteria of performance or some of the competencies that people were assessed on started changing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it leans on to what the culture of the organization names as leadership. And in our organization, we were moving away from traditional roles where people would even name themselves director, a hierarchical title, so to speak. I direct you, I control you, or controller. And we were at the time under transformation, relaunching different archetypes of what leadership meant: visionary, architect, coach, and catalyst. And so even names and titles within the organization were changing under agile transformation to try and challenge traditional leadership norms that maybe were once was in different contexts and conditions at which organizations operate now. And so I hope that helps. If you can imagine, every leader was also, at the same time we were doing team coaching and bringing in these tools, was learning about different archetypes. They came from McKinsey as a consultancy, and you can look them up, but VACC, Visionary, Architect, Coach, and Catalyst, which meant every leader was to show up as a relational catalyst and a coach. So peer coaching became very much a role within any team. How did you lead through coaching, through catalyzing? They're very much relational roles versus directing or controlling. Yeah. I'm a director, I'm a controller, right?
Yeah.
I hope that helps, Prachi.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, because the team is always in disbelief, like my context is not changing, so why am I changing my behavior? And yes, I worked as an enterprise coach in McKinsey, so I'm familiar with that example. Thank you.
ACTC. Yeah, Michael Lurie was the guy. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Jen. I think we are running out of time. One last question we can take from Vibhu since he has raised his hand. So,
Yeah,
and then
I'll be very quick. Does these Enneagram type changes under what, and if so, what conditions?
So let me make sure I heard you. Does your Enneagram type change? And if so, under what conditions?
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I'm going to come back to only you can type yourself. So if you think back at what has been a predominant core fear your entire life, what's motivated you through different stages of your life, what do you see as those patterns? Can it change? The idea is that you are a core type, and through all of the integration work, we become all types, and then we're typeless. It's like we exist at the center of the tool. And if we can integrate all types, then we're pretty self-actualized humans. Because then we're everything and nothing all at once. Right?
Have you experienced anyone Have you experienced anyone who is kind of integrated all?
I personally have not in my journey, anyone who claims to have, but the leaders work at it. So think of the type that triggers you the most, your least like type. And now if you can find a person who embodies that type and learn from them and be curious about their ways, their worldviews, their leadership, and what that means to you, it invites us to start to appreciate people in different ways and then appreciate parts of ourselves that we also disowned or disintegrated at certain points of our journey. Emotions tend to be, I will say we didn't talk about centers, but there's head types, heart types, and gut types. And those that work with their head predominantly start to try and tap into their heart type. And we each have one type, core type in each. And I think, Vibhu, a lot of the change and development becomes through more integration. I'm leading now with a head type, with a heart type, with a body type. And I've got all three on board. And that's when you start to see leaders in really deep integrity and alignment, head, heart, and gut alignment, and operating the world through their own integrity. A lot of times in organizations, what's here up is valued, what's here down, heart and body intensity, they become less valued at times. And so leaders keep working at that, growing their capacity to...
2, 3, and 4 are the heart types, right?
You got it.
2, 3, and 4. Then you have 5, 6, and 7, which are the head types. Then 8, 9, and 1 are the gut.
Body types. Yeah, gut, body, wisdom, action, intensity. So on your handouts, you start to see the centers of expression, the centers of structure, the centers. And if that comes into play, you start seeing leaders really shapeshift because now they're leading through their wholeness. What they think, what they feel, and what they sense, all aligned. Their thoughts, their feelings, their actions, boom, integrity. Courageously authentic. This is why I love be you and live fully. All three. Yeah. I hope that helps, Vibhu.
It's nicely explained and related. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
let's smile and allow Nandini to take a picture while we also still continue talking through that. I mean, Nandini, are you right to take a photograph of all of us on gallery?
Yes, Dex. Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we will smile, and if there's still a question for Jen, we will catch her answering the question in the picture.
Everyone, please switch on your videos.
Yeah, switch on your videos. Let's see everyone's wonderful face.
More than half the crowd has dropped off already, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know. But we will get a few frames at least.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jen. It was really insightful, informative, and so wonderful. And, one thing that you just shared in the last, that if we really start to relate to all types, we would definitely start to acknowledge and appreciate everybody around us. Then we start to really see that, what these are the qualities that we also see within ourselves. So very wonderful. And I think it is going to be very, very important for all of us to really integrate this kind of learning into our coachings. Thank you so much.
I heard somebody say that you are who you think you are not.
That's a good one. That's a good one. All the more curiosity into those types that we say, there's the ones that I don't identify with most.
Those are the shadows.
Growth edges. Those shadows. Yeah. And those are our growth edges. Yeah. Those are the type where we can really do some good work.
So thanks.
I love that.
Anyone wants to close by having the last word to Jen and say how you've experienced the session? We can say that and say bye-bye. Mohan, you want to say something?
Nice facilitation, Dexter, as usual. And Shalini, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks,
you.
Jen.
Yeah, thank you very much to the
Is
host for
Priya
inviting me
still
in.
here? Because
Chapter.
Priya started the conversation just before we started the conversations. I don't know if Priya is still here.
I think,
but
yeah, she left.
yeah, she's just left. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for
Thanks, Jen.
staying.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jen,
Thank
for
you.
your time. Bye for now. And I know we're going to see you again here, Jen. So I'm going to work towards that. And
Thank you.
bye for now.
Dexter.
Have a lovely day, everybody. What's left of it and what's ahead of you, Jen. And see you around. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Be well.
Thank you.